It's a Thursday. Strange thing, I just keep on thinking it's a Friday, but it's a Thursday, which means we head on down to Cheyenne and Wyoming Liberty Group. We're breathlessly running out of a meeting with the latest news and information is Maureen Bader. And you promised me, Maureen, that I'm the one who gets to yell and scream and rant and cuss and hit the dump button. You'll leave that to me, right? Is that the deal?
Absolutely. I would never do something like that.
No, never. No, not in public. So, okay. You have been in a very important meeting in the state of Wyoming dealing with the governor of Wyoming and a promise that he was making to the people of Wyoming. So what's been going on?
Okay, well, as you know, here in Wyoming, it's an economy that depends on oil and gas, right, and the minerals industry. And what's been happening, of course, is and this is not exactly news. The oil and gas prices have been falling, and so what the governor did last week, actually, the meeting I was at this morning, we can talk about in a little bit because it's related to this. But what the governor did last week was say, well, we're going to have to cut $200 million from the fiscal year 2016 budget. Now that means the budget that we're in right now, that runs from July 1st, 2015 to June 30th, 2016. So what he's going to try to do, supposedly, is find cuts in the budget right now. And you know, it's the reason this is not exactly news is that here in Wyoming, the Consensus Revenue Estimating Group, so it's sort of a government group that does the revenue forecasting for the state, right, and it's upon that they base their budget numbers for agency spending. At this time last year, they were starting to talk about how the oil and gas revenues were going to be down for the state budget. And then what we had in the supplemental budget just last January was suddenly this realization, well, and it's not $4 million shortfall, but a $222 million shortfall. And that was last fiscal year. And so what they did then was not cut spending, because I couldn't do that. What they did was divert money from the rainy day fund and a couple of other places. They took money that was supposed to go to other places and they used it to prop up current spending and also fund some additional spending that would be contingent on whether or not the money came in. So it's not exactly news that we're in a situation. The fact that the situation has gotten even worse shouldn't be news either. And the underlying problem here, of course, is that the revenue that supports the government spending has just absolutely been going south. Okay, so this is where it may be too soon for you to be able to give us this little piece of information. But so are we talking about cuts in the rate of growth at this point, or are we talking about actual real cuts that the governor is suggesting? Well, what the governor is talking about aren't cuts, actually. What he's talking about two things. One is to freeze hiring. So that doesn't actually cut anybody's budget. It just means you're not adding to the new budget. And that's only going to save maybe about $18 million or so. And the other thing he's talking about is having agencies give any money back that they haven't already spent from the current fiscal year. The thing is, he's saying that no one is going to get fired. So if no one's going to get fired, what he's likely talking about is something called reversion. And reversion, what happens with a reversion is that an agency gets some money, is appropriated money, and it doesn't spend it. So in 2013-14, so for over 2 years, that particular biennium, reversions totaled $34 million. So if we say reversions are about for a year is about half that. That's about $15 million. So that gives the governor about $32 million in well, you can't really call them cuts. I mean, they're actually sort of savings, like you could say.
Well, I mean,
the problem, though, is that we've got
him, though. I mean, a little bit of a savings here and a little bit of savings there, and eventually, aren't we talking real money?
No.
Okay.
Because he's not talking about really cutting budgets. What he's really talking about are three things. One is raiding the rainy day fund. So he wants to continue spending at this severance tax windfall level. So when severance taxes were really high, we had a big expansion in government spending. I mean, government spending more than doubled. And he wants to keep spending up there, even though the revenue from the oil and gas industry has plummeted. It's just absolutely plummeted. Now, here in Wyoming, for every $5 reduction in the price of oil, state revenues fall by $35 million. So that means right now the state is about $70 million short in severance tax revenue from oil. But it's actually worse for gas, because for every dollar per BTU reduction in natural gas prices, the state loses $100 million. So that's about $170 million shortfall, or that's where about 240 of this what he's calling $200 million shortfall is coming from. But sales taxes are also on the decline. So you're probably thinking, okay, we're at 240 plus more for sales tax reduction. How come the governor's saying $2 million? Well, we're actually ahead a little bit in investment income. The problem with that, however, is that investment income is even more volatile than minerals tax revenue. So you can't depend on a continuation of good investment income earnings to prop up bad spending. We need to see some real spending next year.
Okay, now, so you're the one who sticks her nose in the books all day long, and I actually get a strange feeling that you kind of enjoy doing it sometimes. That's kind of creepy, Maureen. But okay, you stick your nose into the books and you take a look at all of this. What should the governor be doing?
Well, the governor really has got to. The governor has got to be a little bit like Bobby Jindal. We're going to have an event here on November the 16th with Bobby Jindal. He's going to come and talk about how he made real cuts to his budget in Louisiana and how he really improved the economy, created more real jobs for people, not more government jobs, and of course increased tax revenue, and really allowed the government to take on what we would consider to be spending projects that are more in line with the role of government, instead of just spending on things like golf courses and swimming pools and more government buildings. But what he did, what Governor Jindal did, was reduce the state employment by 28,000 jobs. And so by shrinking government like that, you're actually shrinking the burden on the private sector, on the taxpayers in the society. And that allows businesses then to look at Louisiana as a better place to set up and do business. He also eliminated the income tax there. Of course, we don't have an income tax, but we do have cumbersome regulations, and that's another area the governor should be looking at.
Okay, so I was kind of picturing this interesting little water wheel device as you were saying that. So in other words, as you lighten the burden of government on the people, not only do the people have more money, but that spurs economic growth, which of course means more money.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Now, is the Governor Meade, going to get a chance to meet with Governor Jindal?
Yeah, we're working on that now, and so we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens there.
That'll be interesting. I'd like to just sit in that room for a little while here. But here's the thing, though. You tell me about these numbers, and it makes a whole lot of sense to you. It makes a whole lot of sense to me. But I'm not asking you to get inside the guy's head, because that would just be weird. But okay, why isn't Governor Meade seeing this? What is he trying to do, do you think?
Well, what he wants to do, of course, is raid the rainy day fund. Now, what we had about a month ago was the Pew Foundation came and gave a presentation to the Revenue Committee here actually it was up in Buffalo. And that's when I came out to Gillette that time and did a live hit on your show. Mm-hmm. And what the Pew Foundation said was, if you wanted to have a rainy day fund that would fund 9 out of 10 downfalls over a 10-year period, the rainy day fund has to be at least $3.3 billion. Do you know how much our rainy day fund is right now?
No.
$1.8 billion.
Oh, okay. So we're really at a shortfall here. All right.
So we definitely don't have enough money in the rainy day fund to bail out the system. Of course, the other idea the governor has to save money is to, of all things, expand Medicaid.
Okay, now that one's been driving me nuts. And on last week's interview, I asked the same thing with one of your partners. I really want to know, how does he think? Does he just see that money is being dangled in front of him or in front of the state of Wyoming from the federal government, and all he sees is the money that they're dangling? Does he not understand the cost of expansion?
I guess not, because I have never seen any figures to indicate how exactly putting more people on a poorly run government program saves the government money. It's just kind of a backward math thing for me, but I guess we'll see, because the idea that Governor Mead has apparently is to provide to the Joint Appropriations Committee in December 2 budgets for the health department. One shows what the budget would be with Medicaid expansion, and the other shows what the budget would be without Medicaid expansion, supposedly somehow or another to magically convince legislators that they should expand Medicaid to somehow or another save money. So that'll be an interesting time at the Appropriations Committee meeting. I'm looking forward to that.
Is this another one of those cases, though, where you've told me many times, and I've been in a few, but nowhere near as many as you, where we have these committee meetings where there's a lot of people who are in favor of Medicaid expansion or whatever the committee meeting's about. They're in favor of it. And so they pack the room. And to get people who actually, like you, show up with alternate numbers to even show up is very difficult. So would that be a reason for a skewed opinion?
Well, fortunately, what we just had late last week, it was announced that WinHealth, one of the 2 insurers on the Wyoming Obamacare exchange, has decided to drop out because the government, they expected to get about $5 million from the federal government to offset their losses, and it turned out they were only going to get $300,000. Right. So obviously they're not going to. They go, "Oh, wow, we're not doing this anymore." But what that really drives home is that you cannot count on the federal government to keep its promise about funding a program that's just not fundable. Fortunately, that was one of the big reasons why enough Wyoming legislators said, "Look, we can't trust the federal government to actually fund this program, so fund the Obamacare expansion program or the Medicaid expansion program. So we're just going to say no." And evidence since then just shows very clearly that, no, you can't trust the federal government. So the last thing Wyoming should do is lure even more people into a poorly run government program to then either have to take money from roads or someplace else to keep the promise to them, or pull the rug out right from underneath them. I think that's really what's immoral about this whole thing.
I remember playing on this radio show, and a lot of other radio show hosts were doing the same thing. We were playing cuts from Democrats in Congress, House of Representatives, et cetera, et cetera. We were playing cuts of them saying that, well, the whole idea of Obamacare is to crash. We had them on video saying this. Crash the insurance system and get everybody on Medicare, Medicaid expansion as a way of universal health care. Well, during the recent Democrat debate, Bernie Sanders flat out came out and said it again. So we have another video of another Democrat saying it. He was just on MSNBC being interviewed, and he and the host were talking about the exact same thing. So for those people who want to expand Medicaid, Medicare here in America, I guess they didn't see those interviews, even though people like me were playing them over and over again. And what does that do to a state like Wyoming if they're able to pull that off?
Yeah, this idea that the government is the be-all and end-all when it comes to supplying a service. Honestly, people who still believe that to be true,
yeah,
I think it's not so much that they really want the government to be the solution of all problems, that they want people to be worse off.
Yeah.
Because all you need to do is look at what happened in the Soviet Union, and or even closer to the U.S. All you need to, if you want to see what it's like to have a government-run healthcare system, essentially, all you need to do is look at Canada. And I don't know how many people I've met since I've moved down here to the States from Canada who tell me, "Oh, I know some Canadians who came down here for healthcare." Yeah. Because when you've got a government supply of a service, I think even Milton Friedman said one time, if you put government in charge of the Sahara Desert, you'd be out of sand within a few years.
Well, yeah, so many great
So
ones.
if you put government in charge of healthcare, that means that you're not going to get the healthcare that you want. And I think the fundamental issue here is that people think that health insurance means health care,
right.
And it doesn't. Just because you have health insurance doesn't mean you're going to get the care you need. So what happens in Canada, where you've got this, supposedly healthcare utopia, is that you've got a lot of people demanding services, and fewer and fewer of those services being supplied, because what the government has to do is keep medical services within a certain amount of budget. So that means that as demand increases, supply gets crunched, people go on to wait lists, and people, you can be on. I had a friend who had a hernia. he had to wait a year before he had his hernia operation.
That's
but there are people who actually die while on those waiting lists. Now, obviously, if you're on a wait list for a year or two, then think about how much worse your condition gets. That's what a single payer system is like. It's not like you're going to get what you want. You might have to wait for years and years to get it, and then you could actually get much worse and even die. I mean, imagine suffering. You need a knee replacement, and you have to wait a year and a half to get it, and you can't walk upstairs. That's what the Democrats want. It seems that that's what Governor Meade is looking at as well.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, I get to hold the discussion. We got 3 minutes left. Let me pull you over to the state legislature real quick. So the governor wants to cut about $200 million. You've already given us what he intends to do, which are not, looks like real cuts at this point. Any word? I know they're a little ways off here, but from the state legislators on if they intend to take any action?
Well, of course, one of the things we've been dealing with quite a bit down here is the capital renovation project. Now,
oh joy!
It's become pretty clear that there was just no way it was going to stay in budget, even though Governor Meade, back in June, I think it was, said that this project will not go over $300 million. But of course, now with this big revenue shortfall and the fact that in July the Capitol building itself was $5 million over budget, the Hirschler was $32 million over budget, and they were already over budget on the temporary facilities. Obviously, something had to give. So last week, what happened was the new project manager came out with this new plan for the Hirschler building. So the Hirschler building is essentially a very, very ugly V-shaped building. What they were going to do was plop a square building in the middle of the V that is going to be called the Executive Building. And what they've decided to do is get rid of that because it's a poor use of space. Plus, they could save about $31 million by getting rid of it, which almost brings that whole Hirschler part of the capital project on budget. So I was talking to some legislators, and they said, there's just absolutely no way that the capital project is going to get any more money. And not only that, as I mentioned earlier, when they passed the supplemental budget back in 2015, there were a couple of contingencies. Well, the contingency that's due on June 30th, 2016, has $37.5 million in it for the capital project, but the chance of that actually coming through now, with all the volatility in the market, is pretty slim. So that you had this oversight group. They needed to find savings somewhere. They did find it. They found it with the Hirschler. And now what we need to do is see how much more they're going to be able to save if they can get rid of these palatial visions that they have over at the Capitol.
Well, so maybe it's a blessing in disguise that things have slowed down. I hate to say that, but it might save us a little bit of money on the Capitol. Okay, Maureen, where do people find your work?
Please go to wyliberty.org to find out more about the Capitol, and also to register for our Bobby Jindal event when he's here on November the 16th to give some lessons for Wyoming from his experience as the governor of Louisiana.
As always, thanks for coming on.
Always great to be here. Talk to you later.